military science, ending with actually leading combat, 200 warriors in an emulated environment. I've studied bullion banking finance markets for many years. I've actually transacted $100 million worth of financial assets. I'm also a student of domestic politics, international cultures, and geopolitics. I've been to Asia 12 times. And so I like to characterize it as 5 skills: problem solving engineering, tactics and strategy, military scientist, patent attorney for understanding systems, bullion and banking for money flows, and geopolitics for understanding how societies relate to each other.
Now, one of the topics that I'd like to discuss today is about the economy. Now, you talk about the economy and how it seems like it's inevitable that there's going to be an economic implosion. Why do you believe this?
At some point in time, I can't tell you when, the dumping of treasuries from foreign forex reserves is going to overwhelm the Fed's ability to buy these bonds. And at that point in time, interest rates will trigger up, the dollar will devalue simultaneously, and you will start to see an economic collapse. It'll start in the bond market. It'll go into equity markets, then into economies, and I believe we're looking at a redo of the Great Depression, but this time a lot worse. Now, right now, they're trying to keep the system afloat. Bush deficit spent $4 trillion. Obama deficit spent $8 trillion. And I predict that Donald Trump will deficit spend $16 trillion. So you can see the exponential decay. They're using that as financial heroin to keep the system afloat. And it's hanging by a thread. That's why you did not see any meaningful spending cuts with Trump's tax bill. And even these farcical Republicans who raised a concern about no spending cuts were basically ignored. And the reason is, if they cut spending significantly, it will throw the economy into an immediate tailspin. They're trapped. I bet most of them know it, but they won't say anything about it.
Now, do you think this is what we're seeing right now? I mean, with the 10-year Treasury yield, we're seeing it rising, and we're seeing, last week in the stock market, it was the worst week we've seen in 2 years. So do you think this collapse is happening right now?
I can't tell you that this particular jitter is going to snowball. There's a reason why Trump has a Goldman Sachs guy at Treasury. He knows how to manipulate markets. These criminals really know how to do it. So if the bond rates start to go up too high, the Treasury Secretary is going to get busy. Okay, I mean, they've got the whole system rigged, and so I think they're monitoring it. Again, I have to look at foreign forex dumping as being the ultimate trigger. They've been doing some of it, but I don't think it's at the scale right now to where we will see a collapse, say, this year. Now, the Federal Reserve has devalued the dollar 97% since 1913. That's 100 years. You take that 3% and you automatically blow it up to a normalized 100% today. Well, they can just keep on sucking wealth from the people by devaluing the dollar, which devalues people's savings, wages, and pensions, so as to transfer wealth from the private sector to the government and the financial elite. So I don't believe that we're seeing an imminent collapse. I'm not seeing the bond rate take up. But if you notice, you only had a 25 basis point rise in the bond rate, and boom, there was a 1,000-point drop in the Dow. I mean, you can see the correlation going on.
definitely. Now, you talked about how basically the government and the Fed are going to try to manipulate the markets, and they already are. What is the mechanism by which they do that?
Well, the primary means in the equity markets and the commodity markets, such as gold and silver, is the futures. They go in and they slam the future prices down. That affects the current spot price. And so that's how they do it. It's basically futures and derivatives. That's basically how they do it. They don't do it with real gold or silver, selling a bunch of gold and silver. They do it through the futures market. They've been doing it for a long time. They're expert criminals. They know what they're doing.
Now, besides the government manipulating the markets, it seems like, you've also talked about before how there are a lot of illicit gains from manipulating the markets, and banks do this as well. Can you explain what are the illicit gains they make?
Yeah. I remember one time watching a real-time price movement, and they ultimately came in and slammed the price down. Okay, and you can always tell when they do it because it's a straight vertical drop. Nobody's selling to maximize their return on their short sales would do that, dumped so much. And I see right before it a couple little spikes. That is front-running triggering to their buddy saying, okay, we're all going to unload, get ready, get your shorts up, we're going to dump this, we're going to dump it down. So there's real sneaky communication. Now, I can't confirm this, and I want everybody to know is that I'm not smoking the fat cigar in the back room. I'm not in on the deals. I can't mind read. What I do is I look at facts, I build a nodal web. When the facts get repeated, it's a weighted nodal analysis, and from that, you can make guesstimates. So remember, this is all circumstantial evidence, best estimates of what's going on. But they manipulate all markets. Capitalism is dead. They manipulate all markets and currencies, and they do it habitually. It was kind of humorous for me to hear Trump say during his campaign that, well, China's the big currency manipulator. I'm sitting here looking at the Fed going, is he kidding? But it was pandering the common folks. I get it. I think we all get it.
Now, does this manipulation have to do with a wealth transfer? We were recently on Reluctant Preppers, and you talked about the main central theme of a lot of what you talk about. There's going to be this wealth transfer from the private sector to the government. Can you expand on this?
Well, yeah, and it's fairly easy to understand. If the government deficit spends, they create more dollars to do so. That means that the government's going to have a higher proportion of dollars, which means they have more financial power at the expense of the private sector. So when they deficit spend, they transfer wealth from the private sector to the government sector. And it's been going on now, 75 years or more? The deficit spending also creates inflation. This inflation devalues people's wages, savings, and pensions. Who gains from that? The financial elite. If you look at governments around the world, central banks, wars, markets, monetary systems, they are all set up to transfer wealth from the people to the financial elite. That was the common thread that I've discovered. And having now realized the causes of a lot of problems, I then set forth a comprehensive solution set.
And what is that solution to prevent this wealth transfer?
Oh, it's very complicated. Okay. We have to eliminate the national debt. We have to stop the wealth transfer. We have to stop the corruption in D.C. We have to restore the Constitution, and we have to restore the Republic, all at the same time. And I have like a 72 point itemized things of things that you need to do. First one out of the bat, you transfer the Fed. Ron Powell people will love this. Nationalize it under Treasury so that it's no longer a private banking system there for the sole purpose of bailing out the too big to fail, too big to jail banks. That's a first step, for example. Another important thing would have to be a reformation of government. We have to eliminate the welfare state, get it back to the states as the Constitution intended. We have to translate our currency. Now, fiat's failed 600 and some odd times throughout history. Every single time the translation has been successful. This is a proven technique. And basically, you translate the dollar to another currency. And we have only two choices now. We can either go to the SDR and maintain the wealth transfer to the financial elite, because the SDR of the IMF is also a fiat currency, and in so doing helps cement the elitist control over the world. Or we have to revert back to an intrinsic value currency. The best one that's known is gold. It's been trusted for 5,000 years, and you will perhaps then understand why China and Russia are looking at the actions of the Fed, the US government, and they're buying gold hands over fist, because they know at some point it's going to implode. And again, we got to look at that bond market and people and the Forex reserve. I mean, China could implode the world economy in a heartbeat, just boom, unload its treasuries, just like that. I mean, they have that capability now, and there's nothing that the U.S. can really do about it. I mean, we have put ourselves in jeopardy. Okay. They know what's going on. The bankers know what's going on. The average guy, I don't think he really understands the sophistication of it. But the wealth transfer has to do with taking wealth from the people and putting it into government and the financial elite. The financial elite controls the governments. And so what you're really doing is you're channeling power and wealth into a very few number of people. I heard a couple of weeks back, just on the fly, 3 people own as much wealth as half of the people in the United States. That's shocking. And that, the income inequality really started to kick off about 100 years ago when they created the Fed. Okay, that's when it started. And it has been continuing. And I don't see any politicians explaining to people why this is happening and fixing it. And I think it's because the banks and the financial elite have means of enriching politicians. Sure, there's the campaign contributions, but I think there's also some funny stuff. And I'm just going to go out here on a limb and understand I can't confirm any of this. Okay. I don't know. I think it was about 10 years ago, Hillary Clinton bought some cattle futures. She buys some. Banks turn around and say, we want another puppet. So they go into the futures markets, raise the price. She cashes in huge, okay, and she ends up in New York. I don't believe in coincidences that much. And it's there's all kinds of means that they can do it behind the scenes that people just aren't aware of.
Now, you've also talked about, if we don't stop this, that really it leads to financial enslavement. Can you expand on that?
Well, right now, the people are enslaved. I mean, you are either a tax mule, a perpetual debtor, probably both, or a state dependent. You are enslaved. You are enslaved to government handouts, or you're enslaved to the IRS. I mean, the I mean, if you look at property taxes, sales taxes, income, I mean, you add it all up, and I think you're up like around 70% of really what you make. And it is, it is enslavement, and it's been going on for a long time. Okay, and that's really nothing new. The big problem, though, is that after they gutted our manufacturing, there's the job market just isn't really there. I mean, I know Trump heralds the stock market. Well, that's just nothing but easy money manipulation. That's a dead one. The BS comes out with their propaganda all the time. Okay. The Trumpers are over there going rah rah, and I'm sitting here going, yeah, right. It's it's an illusion. The government there always tries to make itself look good. They want calm, they don't want so much rioting and stuff. And so you have that aspect of it. I mean, wages have been pretty much stagnant. They gutted our manufacturing. Good jobs aren't there. They, when I say they, mostly the Fed, the FOMC, Exchange Stabilization Fund, Treasury Secretary. They create serial bubble after serial bubble after serial bubble because when you get large price actions, the financial elite can make out real big. Now, when you make out real big in the stock market, you're not creating wealth. You're simply transferring wealth from somebody else to your own pocket, okay? You gotta make stuff to create wealth. And they absolutely destroyed our manufacturing base. My family comes from the tool and die industry, and I, as a young teenager, just block after block after block of hustling machine shops with all kinds of milling machines, making all kinds of tools for mass producing products. I mean, it was good. And if you wanted a good job, you could get a good job. Auto was king. We had great manufacturing. I feel so sorry for these millennials because the job market isn't really there. Now, they count 4.2%, and that's great as long as you don't count the unemployed. I go by corporate revenues and labor participation. All the other stuff to me is just adjusted models to make them look good, so I don't go there. So these millennials are looking at being enslaved to government, having their wealth transferred, whatever wealth they do have. There's very few good jobs for the number of people that really want them. House prices are totally out of sight. They can't get married before to start a family. It's just a really pathetic thing. And for the millennials, my heart goes out to you. I'm sorry, but the government did it to you. Okay? And that's just the way it is.
No, you're running for U.S. Senate to actually try to fix some of these problems. But for people who aren't, involved in government and maybe, can't make a direct impact, how can they protect themselves from what's coming?
Well, buy things. Property, even cars. And the wealthy know this too. Look at the art, the price of art. It's going through the moon. Why? They can see what's happening. They got a lot of intelligent people working for them, so they buy things. They buy things of value that's going to retain value. For us little guys, pick up a silver coin or two every now and then. Become your own central banker. Try to have your own little nest egg. See, when you've got a silver dollar in your pocket, you're free from the printing press, and that's freedom. Gold and silver are freedom. It's freedom from government and the economic, financial machinations of the financial elite and government. That's the only thing that I can really recommend. A couple of coins, whatever you can afford, maybe 5% every week or something. Just keep going with it. After a while, you build up a little nest egg if worse comes to worse, and it will come. It's just a matter of when. that's probably the simplest thing. The recommendation is simply buy things that retain their wealth, their value, not their price, but their value. How many loaves of bread can this thing buy? So you put it in terms of wealth, not price.
Now, how bad do you see the economy getting? Because some people, you just talked about at the beginning of this interview how you see it being worse than the Great Depression. Some people have talked about the supply chain, getting all disrupted.
Oh,
How
yeah.
bad do you think it'll get?
Oh, if it goes down, it will be a lot worse than the Depression because of the fact that, first of all, high tech is usually the first thing to go. It's most susceptible when there's a collapse because you got to be able to repair the stuff, keep it maintained. If the economy goes down, that's not going to happen that much. People are not on rural farms. We're all independent. We're specialists these days. So the cultural logistics are set up for a huge fall. Okay, and yes, the distribution chain would fail. And you could see riots at grocery stores. I mean, look at what's happening in Venezuela right now. 600 people migrated into Colombia when their economy collapsed, and it's just basically the same thing. They overspent it, and their currency trashed. And I've heard reports of cannibalism. Believe it or not. I mean, this is wild. It can get dangerous, and it can happen here. Now, in government, they're watching it, they're monitoring it. And like I said, if Trump deficit spends $16 trillion, he'll keep the financial injection going, and it can be sustained until it's no longer sustained. And for that, you're going to have to look at the bond market. It'll be a trigger. You will probably see a big move in the bond market to the downside, and then you're going to have about 2 months, maybe, to be able to adjust really quick. Start stacking up on dry foods and waters, and get prepared like the preppers do, because it's going to be survival. I think it can be that hard. Now, they'd mobilize the army to help transport foods, and they would start giving priorities to gas truckers. I mean, they can mobilize and try to soften the blow. Let's hope it doesn't get to a riot, cannibalization, situation. But it's going to get bad. It'll get bad. I mean, the unemployment, which is probably depends upon how you calculate it, of course. There's different methods. It's probably upward of 20% right now. Trump's tooting his horn and instilling confidence in the people. I think it's a good thing. I don't really fault him for that, and he's making hay. But at some point in time, you got to get honest with people, and you got to sit there and say, look, there's a potential for this, and you should be prepared. I don't know what's going on in terms of centralized planning behind closed doors. I don't know what preparations to meet, but I can't believe that they're that naive not to realize the potential for economic implosion. It's going to happen. Okay. We don't know when. Trump has to, like I said, deficits spend $16 trillion, and we just may muddle through the Trump presidency. Okay. But there is the potential for the fall, a hard fall, a big fall. And so keep your eye on the bond market. There's your clue.
And as for what the government will do once this collapse happens, like they say, the quote is, never let a good crisis go to waste. So do you see attempts to take away our liberty because of this crisis?
No. I'm going to get a call from the President of the United States and say, Derek, it happened exactly as you said. We need to fix this. Come over here to and advise the president on how to fix it. Congress doesn't know what to do. They're like deers in the headlights. They don't have no clue how to fix it. I do. I have right now like a 70-point list of things that we do. Okay, and they're all individually fairly simple. But in order to do this, we need that crisis. Because with Congress sitting fat and happy, getting their campaign contributions and other types of rewards for public service, they're not going to move. And they're in party power mode, as they've been for the last 20 years. It's not about the country. It's all about political party power. And you have the farcical conservatives on one side versus the progressive fascists on the other side. There's no such thing as the Republican Party or the Democrat Party, okay? These are farcical conservatives and progressive fascists that are pandering the people for political power. They are Republican. You see, when I think of Republican, I think of, or the Democrats, I go back, when I was a teenager. The noble liberals of the party of Jack Kennedy, who believed in protecting our liberties, helping the poor, avoiding wars, even though he did go into Vietnam. And the Republicans, try to get that balanced budget, be responsible. That isn't with us anymore. That's long gone. The noble liberalism of the Democrat Party is morphed into progressive fascism. And the Republicans simply give up one principle after another to try to maintain their political power. That's where we're at. I would be afraid of the progressive fascists getting in control. These people are totally out of control. And they are the kind that says, well, we have to manage all these ants. So we're going to dictate every aspect of their lives because it's progressive and it's good for them. And it's good for everybody. And so I'd be more afraid of the Democrat Party declaring martial law than I would the Republicans. I think they're a little bit more tied to our founding father roots, our Constitution. But in emergencies, they too can go. I mean, what's Donald Trump going to do? How's he going to fix this? So it is a concern about martial law, but that's why everybody should be packing. The last defense to our freedoms and liberties is the Second Amendment. All true patriots should be packing. Don't take your guns to town. Keep them at home, but have them in case you need to defend our national freedom and liberty from absolute totalitarian lockdown in D.C. And with the potential of economic implosion, the possibility of that is a little bit more higher today than it was, say, 30, 40 years ago.
All right. Well, Derek Michael Reed, thank you so much for joining us today. Before we let you go, did you want to share with the viewers where they can find you online, where they can support you if you're there, if they live in California, and any last thoughts you'd like to add?
Only that I'm basically an unknown. If anybody could send me emails regarding some newspaper people, radio, talk shows, or alt media such as yourself, Elijah, that would be greatly appreciated. I believe I can win if I get publicity. Okay? That's what I need. I need publicity. My website is derekmreed.com. My PayPal and email address is liberines@yahoo.com. I analyzed the world for 20 years. I wrote hundreds and hundreds of memorandums. I've been published around the world. That information is uploaded into my blog as background information. And so all of the stuff that I'm saying, which is on in the position section, is backed up. I mean, you can find this stuff. And the blog is, I think, well together. I do everything myself. I even turn on Skype, so I do it all myself. And if any of you out